It's that time. Hey, you're not Matt. Who are you and what'd you do with Matt? Oh, I've got you muted. Look at that.
I was like,
I was pretending you were Matt.
I,
That's why I had you muted.
oh, yes. No, I am not Matt. I
Well,
am
Kate,
not Matt
welcome.
Curran. I'm happy to
Welcome.
be here, though. I'm honored to be here, Doc.
We have a great show lined up for everybody tonight. You have brought a wonderful gentleman. Uh, I'll take that $20 later. To the show tonight, and well, why don't we just introduce him now?
All right. Yes. Well,
Jackpot.
I have Mr. Ryan Griffus with me today. And for those who don't know me, before we get into introductions, just since I'm new, I am Kate Gallahue. I am one of the leaders in Convene Communities, been a part of the Convene family now for since 2021. So this is just a place where we get real, and that's what we're doing tonight. Ryan and I share a passion for youth development, and I spent some time, about 19 years of my life in pediatric medicine. So are a big part of my heart, and both of us really share a realization that we can help youth move forward by teaching concepts like resilience and character development and all kinds of different things. But in Convene, one of the things we do here with the Mental Wellness podcast is we allow incredible people who are using their story for good to join us and share that story. And you have a pretty long, deep story that you've really grown confident in sharing where appropriate to change and ultimately, I believe, save lives, Ryan. You are a gentleman that works in the juvenile justice system as the director at our local juvenile care center, and the deputy court administrator. But anyone who meets you immediately sees the heart for the kids that you serve. And I know that we'll get to that story about how you evolved into this career path, but let's start with some of the backstory. How did you get into this line of work, and what's some of those pieces of the puzzle that led you to have such a passion for helping youth overcome challenges? If you don't mind sharing with us.
I don't mind. Doc, Kate, thanks for having me. Thanks for everybody for listening. I'm glad, Kate, that you said it. You always say what I'm thinking, it seems. And that is that it is, for me, it's about the heart. And I've been in the child welfare world and the juvenile justice world now for, I hate to admit, because I'm going to date myself here, but it's been 20 years, pushing 20 anyway. In a variety of different roles. And I started in the child welfare world as a child protective services investigator, a foster care case manager, prevention worker, juvenile justice worker, supervised all those programs, and then went on to help run a homeless shelter here in Isabella County, where I reside in Mount Pleasant. And then ultimately took on one more nonprofit, brought on youth advocacy programs, which is a national program based out of the East, mostly originated in Pennsylvania, but I was the first director to bring it here to Michigan. And then I got the call to where I am now. And where I am now is a culmination of so many things in my career, educationally, professionally, but personal experience. Personal experience is where the connection was, and personal experience is what I use as not only a daily motivator, but just the basis for everything. My why is rooted in my own personal experiences, which if you want to preface that a little bit more, I can go into that. It's a tale, but I don't know if you want me to start there or where you want me to start. I'll give you a chance to interject.
I'd like to know when you were born, if we could start there.
Yeah, so it was a rainy night in July.
Well, Ryan, I think what we'll do is I know I want to kind of share a little bit about how you and I met first, and that will lead to the backstory. Okay.
Yeah.
So I sit on the Youth Impact Partnership for Midland County, and I made a mutual friend of yours, or met a mutual friend, and we had coffee for a different purpose, but I started telling her a bit of my story of why I really found this passion for helping youth heal versus reacting to their disease and medicine. And she heard my story of some of my own pain points, and what led me to realizing that when I was authentic with my patients, where appropriate, and we made that connection. It wasn't the stethoscope, and that gave me credibility. It was that I understood them and that I saw them, and we connected in our humanness. And she said, I have somebody you have to meet. And I just need to make it happen. I know we're here for a different reason, but the whole time I'm thinking you need to meet Ryan. And so we did, and we met, and we talked about how our stories are so important, and how they become that guidebook for somebody else who's walking through a hard time, to show them they aren't alone. And that's really where people cultivate trust with you, and you get credibility, not because of how much you know, because of our CMU education. I know you're a fellow Chippewa,
Yeah,
but
fire up. Yep.
it's not from all of that. It's from what we've learned through wisdom and experience. And when you have a tool that can help them because you actually walked in those shoes that were somewhat similar, then that's how we break through with people. So in your line of work, we met at the Monarch Academy, which we can explain how that all came to be in the future too. It's just such a wonderful name that gives those kids dignity that you work with.
Yeah.
But you had an experience where some of your story was able to be shared, and it was the most releasing, the most relieving opportunity for you to let go of some of that weight that you carried, and
Yeah.
recognized that it needed to
Yeah.
be shared. So
Yeah.
maybe we can get to that, but maybe I'll leave that up to you. We can start with the backstory and lead up to when you shared, or we
Yeah.
can start with what you realized.
Yeah, let me give you. So I'm going to give you. Usually, like I was saying pre-show here, usually my speech on describing my life is about a 90-minute talk. I'm going to try to condense that down here to about 5 to 10 minutes. And I know those of the guests that are listening in right now are rolling their eyes really hard because they know me better than that. Anyway, yeah.
Time's up.
Yeah, I tried.
Sorry, went too long.
Yeah, so I grew up. I have a younger sister who's 2 years older, or excuse me, 2 years younger than me. I'd like to think I'm the younger one, but that doesn't work out. My parents were together until I can't even remember how old I was now when they divorced, but I was young, very young. And my father, my biological father, is likely, and I've said this, I say this in every public speech or every presentation I ever give. I've been in child welfare and juvenile justice now, or some aspect of that, for 20 years, as I stated earlier. And I've worked with all kinds. I've worked with child abusers, drug addicts, mentally ill, neglectful people. I've worked with murderers, I've worked with rapists, I've worked with all kinds of violent characters, and I will say, hands down, without question, my biological father he scared me more than any other person I've ever met and I've ever encountered in my professional career. He was just a dangerous human being, for many reasons that I'll spare, just to say that his disregard for me or anything to do with me it's jarring still to even stop and consider, especially being a father myself. But when my parents split, my father was so violent to my mother, and repeated and just dangerous, that my mother made a great decision, and she initially moved out, but not far enough away. And it wasn't good enough because she was still in danger. And so she chose to move farther away and put a real nice buffer zone in between them, which was a great move, and allowed my dad to move on to many, many other women, which he had been unfaithful blatantly and openly for as long as I could remember what it meant for my dad to take women into the bedroom and spend some time in there while my mom was at work. And then they'd come out, and I didn't understand it then, but I do now. And, after that, my mom moved, and it was really important to me. I just, at that point in my life, me and my sister, for that matter, we had a connection to a friend group. We were established in school. We wanted to stay. We didn't want to move. And, my dad, master manipulator, like a lot of addicts and people who are in active addiction or alcoholism are, convinced her to, we stayed with my dad at his house, and it got worse from there. And what I mean by worse was he would just leave us alone for days at a time. And we're talking, my sister and I probably at this age, 6 and 4,
Oh,
7 and 5, 8 and 6. He'd just leave us alone for days at a time. And he would spend a lot of time in downtown Saginaw. He had a habit at that point, a crack cocaine habit, and addiction to prostitutes. And so he'd spend his time just dabbling in that. We'd see him every now and then. And when we did, he'd come home, and a lot of physical punishment if chores weren't done to his liking or whatnot. And then that would result in us being locked in our room for who knows how long. No bathroom, no food, no water, just for a long time, with tape and stuff over our doors and all that, measures to make sure he knew we weren't getting out. Eventually, my sister moved out, thankfully, which I'm firmly convinced it changed the trajectory of her life completely. And I'm very, very thankful that at a young age, she moved back with my mother. But and a lot of folks, I know we're on a mental health podcast here, so hopefully folks will understand what I'm about to describe. But my father more or less kept me in prison. And I don't mean physical prison. I mean a mental prison. Prison of manipulation, and that manipulation and fear. He had control over me because I've seen what he's capable of. He was an incredibly violent man, and I've seen him carry it out. And there were more times than not that I'd wake up to him crying and, a gun to his head or a knife to his throat. And he said basically to me that if you leave too, I'm going to kill your mom. I'm going to kill your sister. I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill myself. So you're here. And that was it. And for me, a lot of people are like, why didn't you just tell somebody? Why didn't you just move with your mom? I felt at that point that I was protecting my mom. It was my job as a young boy. Now I can't say anything. I kind of just have to be here and absorb what he has to put out so I can protect my mom and my sister. And I felt responsible for him to a degree too, because he's so unstable and, he's going through whatever. So it was just a weird, like, invisible prison is the way I describe it. And I stayed, and, it amped up. It got insanely dangerous after that. At about 10 years old, and I just told this story I do a daily video, a YouTube video for the kids of our facility. Try to do one a week. Usually I try to do them every day, but it doesn't pan out, life. But one of the things I mentioned was one of the things I just started talking about recently. The kids always are amazed because I'm up at 2 a.m. every day. And one of the kids asked me, why are you up at 2? Like, why do you get up at 2 o'clock? And I said, my body's up at 2 no matter what, every day. And before I could finish, that sentence, one of the kids said, that's a trauma response. And I almost fell off my chair, and I said, bingo, dude. How'd you know that? He's like, if your body's waking up, it's for a reason. Like, you don't need an alarm. And he's right. At about 10 years old, my dad worked at General Motors at the time. And every single day that he supposedly worked, I think he worked at GM. We went to GM every day. But in the morning, my dad would get me up at 2, and he'd sit me at the kitchen table, and he would smoke weed and drink coffee. And I would cut the corners off all these Ziploc baggies and hand them to him. And he'd start packing them in and twist them up and throw them in his he had a really nice, fancy wood finished box. Ironically, said Holy Bible on the front of it. Not a good look. But he had a stick shift Ford Festiva, if anybody knows what that little matchbox of a car was. And he taught me how to drive that thing. And so every day before school, it was my job to drive him to GM. I dropped him off in the parking lot. And he didn't go in the building. He got into another guy's car. And then everybody came to that car. And my job was to drive home and make my drops on the way. And the drops were the houses that he told me to stop at, and somebody comes out. And if they don't come out, my job is to go up and make sure that that pack's delivered. And if it doesn't get delivered, you can guess who pays for it. And some of the things that I saw, not only doing that, but hopefully too many of our guests here listening can't raise their hand and go, yeah, I know what it's like to look into a crack house. But I'll say this, it leaves you guessing. It leaves you guessing who you're looking at. Are they alive or are they dead? That person looks not to be with us anymore. And then if you go back the next day and that's the same case, you're pretty sure you saw a dead body. But that was my life for a couple years. Eventually, my father met a woman named Felicia, and she was a prostitute that he frequented. He frequented her quite often, and brought her home to our house quite often. She was a crack addict as well, and she ended up staying at our house. So it was me and those two, and they got married. And it was just an absolute war zone, because with Felicia, we didn't have to go, there was no more deliveries. The life came to our house. And so our house essentially became a war zone. And Felicia still was involved in her, I don't know if you want to refer to it as a profession, I'm not sure, but she was still doing, living that life. And so she would be gone for nights. She'd take off and go get a fix and visit clients and things. And my dad would take me with him to go seek her out, to find her. And this is a picture of the guy we're talking about here. He'd no fear in this man. I don't think he feared death, but he would take a gun with him and he'd kick down the door of every house that he thought she would frequent, and eventually drag her out by her hair and bring her home. And when here's a weird paradox for you, because when we got home here, this was a major problem for me, and it still is to this day, I think. But her punishment essentially was, and I'm sorry for listeners who might be sensitive to what I'm about to say, but her punishment, if you will, for those actions was my father would forcefully rape her, and he would force me to watch that act. And that was control for him, both over her and for me, because he still wanted to, insert into my thought pattern that don't you ever think about leaving either. Eventually, I was 12 years old, and it was November, and it was November 17th, and it was not warm out. A situation unfolded that wasn't uncommon in my house. A fight was brewing, and it was in the kitchen. The house was super small, ranch style, no more than, I don't even know, maybe 900 feet. I mean, it was 900 square feet. It was very, very small. You could hear and see everything. And same as always, fighting, pushing, punching, biting, all the things, glass breaking, things being thrown. But then it's something about this night, and people ask me all the time, what was different? And I can't describe it, but usually I find myself in the middle of those things. I find myself trying to break it up, fist fighting with my dad or whatever, or, jumping on and restraining him or whatever the case is. But this night was different, and I didn't want any part in what was going to happen. I just intuitive. I don't know what it was, but I went to my bedroom and I could see into the kitchen. And I saw the same thing that I've seen 100 times. I saw Felicia spit in his face, but then he was quiet, and he's never quiet after that happens. It's usually he's on her in a minute, and it's really violence from there. This time he was very quiet, and I shut my bedroom door because that didn't feel right. And the next thing I heard was broken glass, but it was quiet again. And the quiet was more eerie than anything I can ever imagine. And I had to look. What do you do in that situation, right? You have to look. And when I looked out, I saw Felicia's head still kind of half lodged in the front of the stove, the glass, and more blood than I've ever seen that I even knew existed in a human body, to be honest with you. And I thought I saw her. I thought I witnessed her murder. And for me, that was a prompting that it's life or death at this point. I had already been trained how to shoot a pistol at the door when I don't recognize the voice behind it, because it's likely somebody coming to collect money. I've had drug debts collectors come and visit, and these things were life for me, but this made me feel I can't do this anymore. And that fight or flight turned into flight. And I just ran. I jumped out my front bedroom window and I just ran. No plan, no idea, no real thought, to be honest with you. When adrenaline kicks in like that, I don't know if those of you that experienced it, but I just ran. And I ran until I just, again, no thought, just stopped and just kind of, looked around and collected myself. And I was in a parking lot at this point of a Lutheran, I think it was a Lutheran church or a Catholic church, I can't remember. And there was another building right next to it, a closed down boat factory where I lived. There's a little alleyway that you could duck into, and you're kind of out of sight. And it was still, it was getting dark at this point. And I just ducked in there and I just caught my breath and I sat down at the end of this alleyway. And I just thought to myself, I just watched somebody get killed. Like, I can't go back there. So I didn't. I just stayed the night there. I sat there and I drifted in and out of sleep and woke up and thought about what am I going to do and where am I going to go? And I just went to school the next day. I just went to school. I got there when the custodian got there and got in the school and cleaned myself up and went to school and told nobody, because history in my house told me nobody's getting arrested, because nobody ever did. Nothing ever really happened. My dad would go to jail for 30 days here, 45 days there, 90 sometimes, but never, anything serious like he really deserved. But here's the kicker, right? And I'm sorry, I know I'm going long, but this is it kind of frames my story. And people ask me, well, what did your dad do? Did he come looking for you? He didn't come looking for me. I knew too much. I knew what he had been doing. I knew what he forced me into. I knew where all the money and the drugs and the guns and all the things were. He didn't come looking for me. And so I just stayed gone. And for 6 years after that, from the time I was 12 until I was 18, I lived in 21 total different houses, people giving me places to crash, beds, couches, floors, whatever. There were nights where, a door wasn't open to me and it was sleeping in my alleyway, or it was, I know you're on vacation and your family has this cool pole barn where you got a couch in there and I can go sleep on that. Or I've been to your house a million times and I know that nobody even comes in the garage and you got some moving blankets in there, so I can break into there and crash. Or, eventually I worked up some money through a part-time job and got a car. That was my home for a long time. But that was life for 6 years for me. And it stayed that way. I had some advantages and disadvantages along the way, though. My outward appearance was this. It was happy man, shining athletically, football star, and lots of things going for me. Colleges asking me to come play and lots of friends, and was never hurting for money because I could always break back into my dad's house and grab 100 here or 50 there and have my needs met. So I just hid basically in plain sight for 6 years dealing with that. Kate, you mentioned what happened after that, and I didn't tell anybody for those 6 years, period. I mean, people knew I wasn't at home. They knew I was bouncing around, but nobody really dove in and asked why, because I don't think they would have believed it if I would have told them, to be honest with you, because my dad was a cool guy. After that, though, later in life, that's when I started, I worked in child welfare. And when I met parents who were going through things and I saw some of the challenges, I mean, they were a product of a cycle. It was the same thing I was. My dad, his dad before him, violent, alcoholic, mentally ill, drug, his adopted dad was even worse. I'm working with people who have unresolved trauma and they've never had an opportunity to connect with anybody to understand what happened to them. And that's where I flipped my script. I started speaking to my clients about not what did you do wrong, but what happened to you? Let's start there. How did we get to this point? What happened to you? Let me understand you first so I can understand how we're in the situation we're in. That's not my aha moment, but I feel like I should take a break and let somebody else talk.
Well,
You're doing great.
Thank you for
Okay.
your vulnerability, Ryan, and sharing all of that. It's you tell your story very eloquently, but I'm sure it wasn't so easy to tell that the first time. You share it from a place of passion to help others now, but um, you know, yes, you're correct that um, I'm sure in those moments where you encountered people who were hiding in shame and knowing that what they've done, and they are looking to you for what's next, and for you to say, let me understand what happened to you, tells them that you value them as a human being. You're seeing them, you're hearing them, you understand them, and then you started to move into a little bit more of just that shared connection opportunity that
Yeah.
maybe didn't come right away, but it eventually came. And I think it's very key that you're talking about breaking these cycles, because generational trauma is something that so many of your students
Yeah.
have to handle. They have heavy, heavy backpacks that they carry
Yeah.
in, and it's mental weight and
Yeah.
emotional
Absolutely.
weight in addition
And the
to.
isolation,
Mhm,
the isolation is one of the worst things, Kate. And you had mentioned that actually at the onset of this talk, and I'll get to my aha moment of where I really
mhm,
felt like I really need to harness this and start spreading this like wildfire. But I did introduce that in the early stages of my career, just in bits and pieces, because it felt silly for me. Honestly, I felt stupid getting these reports of things that had happened and going out and judging people based on what
yeah.
I'm reading. If somebody would have judged me on all the things that I had to do to survive, and Kate, Doc, listeners, I did a lot of bad stuff to survive. I did a lot of things that I will forever regret. I hurt, manipulated, stole, uh, squeezed through a lot of situations just to eat, just to sleep,
Mhm,
just to get through. And I burned a lot of bridges doing it, because really, just like our kids that we deal with, or just like the parents that we deal with, it's not personal, it's survival. And I
right.
didn't intend on hurting anybody along the way. You got to do what you got to do to survive. And so
Mhm,
every time I would work with a client, we would start talking, and their stories sounded exactly the same, as like very similar, right? We have so many commonalities between us that I thought, I I can't not be real with these people. I can't take my little clipboard out there and have people, uh, writing down their little quotes and use it against them. I have to be real with them.
mhm,
Um, I want to address, actually, that's an excellent question in our chat that Brenda popped up. She said, "How did you break the cycle?" Brenda, I will say this: I broke the cycle by doing exactly what I'm proposing, that I employ right now with my story, and that I propose to all our kids. This is exactly the approach I take with all of our kids. Is, for me, breaking the cycle, I didn't have the dad that I needed to guide me through, but I did have coach, teacher, mentor, friend's dad, community member, different pieces of a man that I thought, I like that. I like what he said. I like what he's about. I like this. And I pieced together this picture that I could follow. It wasn't a tangible, living, breathing person, but I used a culmination of all of these men and their virtues to say, okay, there's your guideline.
mhm,
And I just patched that together. For me, breaking the cycle had a lot to do with football. I'll be honest with you. If I wasn't athletically inclined, I probably wouldn't have had. And in the spirit of vulnerability, even that, even the notoriety I received from football didn't stop me from authoring several dozen suicide notes and making attempts on my life and just wanting to die. Despite all the accolades and attention, it was the loneliest I could ever imagine a person being. And
mhm,
for those of folks that know me and know me from that time frame, they would wonder, man, dude, you were like everywhere. Like, there are people everywhere around you. I was dying inside. I was more lonely, more scared, depressed, anxious, than ever before, than I could ever imagine. So, for me, breaking the cycle, I was just talking with somebody about this the other day, and it's this unspoken resolve, thankfully, that there was just something else. When I'm sitting in an alleyway or I'm underneath a bridge and the rest of the world is going on, I'm saying to myself, this can't be it. There's no way this is it. I didn't go through all of this to just have it be this and then, that be the rest of my life. Otherwise, what am I? I'm another spoke in that stupid cycle of brokenness and dysfunction. And
Mhm.
so I just took all of what I knew to be good in these models that I had, and I said, I'm going to break this. This stops with me. Even at that age, I said to myself, like, this has to stop. I knew what happened before me, and it can't happen to me. Somebody has to break it. And so basically, that's kind of where I started, was understanding that what I was going through, and this is what I tell our kids all the time: your pain, your trials, your challenges right now, and all this suck is going to be a hell of an inspirational story to use on the next person that's going to need some encouragement. You're going to be on a stage giving advice to people who need desperately to know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel for them, that they're not destined to be what happened to them.
Yeah, that's
Another
so
one,
true.
I've got a question for you.
yes, sir.
What made you decide to stay in school? I mean, you could have easily chosen a different route.
Football, athletics, and
At 12 years old?
I was
yeah, well,
curious
and
too,
the
when
social
was that
aspect.
discovered? When was your athletic ability in football? Was it junior high? Like when you had
Uh,
that opportunity to
yeah, there's a gentleman by the name of Jim Swartzendruber who I credit to this day for giving me confidence, and another gentleman by the name of David Larson who really spoke words into me that filled me up right at the right time.
Mhm.
And they let
Mhm.
me know, they kind of spoke like future hope into me, and
Yeah.
let me know, like, dude, you could do something with this. And it really, I don't know, it just gave me something to hang on to, and it just kept going. Like the right time, people would say something and they would, give me a little bit more to keep going. And, I didn't hurt for friends. I didn't hurt for, I didn't hurt for attention. And so for me, school was the constant, right? If
Mhm.
anything in
And
my
you
life.
what I heard in your story is you had developmental assets. You didn't know that term, but you had
Yeah,
people in your life that you gravitated to the positive energy that they were putting into your space at school. School was a safe place for you. School was
right.
where people encouraged you and they believed in you. So that's what you are doing with the youth that you now serve is you're not telling them what they did wrong and what they're not. You're telling them who they are as an individual. You're
It's not what's
building
wrong with you, it's what's strong
it's
with you,
what's
right?
strong with you. Exactly. Yes. He has a video called that.
I do, yeah.
Yes,
Check out the YouTube page.
yes, exactly.
But developmental assets, right? We and studies have shown that overcoming these adverse childhood experiences, resilience is what kids need to combat that and come out of it.
Mhm.
And for me, that's exactly what it was a few important, meaningful relationships in my life in the way of, mentors and teachers and coaches. And for anybody listening, you don't have to have you don't have to have any magic wand or this awesome ability. Honestly, my lifesavers were regular people. They were regular
Mhm.
people who just spoke into me at the right time, and just really gave me what I needed with perfect timing. And so I could go on with that list that I can credit people of just, giving me what I needed in little doses
Yeah.
to carry me through.
Well, and that's
We all have that
dopamine they were
opportunity.
giving you, right? They were
Yeah. Heck
dripping
yeah.
little bits of so your brain needed that to get you through those depressed states,
Yeah.
and words of encouragement drip dopamine into individuals, and so that
That's right.
you sought that out because it felt safe and it felt good, and you liked who you were in those different environments. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And we all have that opportunity in any role that
you
we
do.
play in life. We
Yes.
we come across people, kids, and this isn't adults aren't immune to this either, right? Our generation, I'm capturing all of us in the same basic generation.
Thanks,
Um,
buddy.
yeah, you got you, man. Um, we're the first generation that kind of is on the, like, we're in the backside of it, but we're starting to talk about this and recognize that, oh, all of those really traumatic things that we went through in life, they manifest later on, and they affect us in
Mhm.
so many ways, in physical manifestations, the relationships we build, all those things. And so it's really important to recognize and meet these kids with understanding about what is shaping them, and we have the
Yeah,
ability to help shape them. And I take it now that we're with this knowledge base and we're aware of how early life impacts kids on a longitudinal scale. It's our responsibility,
it is.
and
We used
if
to
we have,
do. Go ahead, Ryan. Finish your
oh, I was
thought.
gonna say,
I'm
if we
sorry
have
to
if we
interrupt.
have lived experience, and we can identify those feelings and those fears and
Mhm.
anxieties. I still haven't got to how that opened my eyes, but I will. If we have that, not saying everybody does, and that's okay, but if we do, we can take, and this is why this work, this concept is so fulfilling to me, is because all of what I just described, none of that happened in vain anymore. It's not just something that happened to me and I went, oh, dang, that's going to suck for the rest of my life and I don't know what to do with that. No, I'm taking it and I'm flipping it on its ear. And I use some colorful words when I describe this about kind of my mentality in that, and I'll spare it for the audience, but my motivation is like, all of that is just fire, man. It's just fire fueling the engine to do good for these kids. Take all those lessons that really I couldn't have been taught in school. It was living it. I had to. And now I'm turning around and I'm helping the next kid up so they can do the same. And now guess what? What are we doing? Not only are we breaking a cycle, we're
We're
making cycles,
making a new one. Yeah.
making new cycles.
I got to tell
Hmm.
you, I really like your approach because, most times kids already know that what they did was wrong. They
Oh
don't
yeah.
they don't need that beat
That's
down,
right.
right? That constant beat
Yeah.
down. They need somebody to lift them up. All right, yeah, we know what you did is wrong. Let's find out why. Let's find out how not to go down that road again. So
It
wow, I
makes
take my hat off to you.
Oh, Doc, it makes me, I'll tell you what, it does. It leaves me with a really, really ill feeling when people label our kids a certain way. I say our kids, the kids I work with, when they label them as quote unquote bad kids or broken kids. No, they're not bad kids. They're a culmination of their experiences. And sometimes
Mhm.
they make goofball decisions. Didn't we all when we were teenagers,
Yeah.
right? If somebody would have labeled me a bad kid during those years, football, friends, anything, I don't think there would have been enough to keep me holding on in this life. I would have ended it because people had this perception of me as this really good, like all American athlete kid. And I needed that. If people
Yeah.
would have labeled me otherwise for the things I did to survive and not taken time to understand why I had to do that, I would have folded. I know I would have. So
Mm.
I thank you for saying that, because that's important to remember when we're working with these kids. They're not consciously waking up and making these decisions to be quote unquote bad. They might be sleeping in class all day because mom and dad were up all night beating the hell out of each other, or
Yeah.
the cops were at my house again because my house got raided because my brother's selling drugs, or a multitude of things. So
It's so
yeah,
true.
great point.
Yep, and those kids are so blessed to have you as just their mentor, but you are then creating that positive environment for them because you know how much you needed it, and that you make school a place where, and you're shifting a culture. You're letting these kids know. We'll get to that in a moment a bit, but letting these kids know that there's different ways that we can speak to ourselves first through your videos, but then
Yeah,
turn around and speak to each other in a
yeah,
way that's respectful and life-giving. And when you know how that compliment made you feel, well,
yeah.
turn around, give that compliment to someone else. That actually makes you feel good too. So
Yep.
the giver and the receiver and the observer of the compliment all get dopamine. So you're creating
Yeah.
these positive emotions in your space that you have those kids for that period of time, and you are a lifeline along with the educators and mentors that you're teaching to speak that same language of strength and resiliency awareness, that
Absolutely.
that we can grow even more resilient through the things we go through. So
Yeah, it's their proving ground. It's a badge of honor for them. I mean, it's really, really sucks going through it, and I'll never deny that to any of them. But um, I always, and that's, a line that we're all familiar with because we've heard it once or twice in our lifetimes. But I always try to be the person that I needed at that age, right?
mhm,
Um, and if we keep that in the back of our mind when we're dealing with these manifestations of behavior, because this kid is angry or they won't pay attention or they're disrespectful or all the things, if we get past that and understand that hysterical behavior typically equals historical trauma, we can begin to understand why we're seeing these behaviors. These kids don't want, and we work with kids. I see a question on the side. Brenda, you're awesome. I also see, by the way, a lot of my friends here who I have to just give a shout out, because the people that I'm seeing signed in and listening are champions in the same type of work with the same mind and heart, and I'm so grateful for them. But yeah, that's, I mean, Doc said it best, right? They know. They know they did wrong. We don't need to remind them of that. We need to remind them of all of these protective factors that they have, these positive attributes that we can start to build on, and just shift their paradigm and help them understand that what you're doing right now is you're writing a story of your life. And
mhm,
it's going to be a story of overcoming a lot of trauma, a lot of troubles, challenges that a lot of people won't ever understand. But you're going to come out on the other side and tell that story to somebody who just needs that boost from you. So,
You
yeah,
know,
giving them kind of some pride.
speaking of paradigm shifts, and I think you're already on this. I think the shift needs to come with the children, sure, but the shift really needs to come with the adults. We need to
Oh,
set our
mm.
egos aside
Thank you for saying that, Doc. Yeah.
and realize that it's not about us, you know?
Doc, you're
And
right.
kids
And
don't wanna know how perfect we are, right? They wanna know that we're human just like them.
Right.
So, it
well,
doesn't
I'll
help
tell you what.
to just tell them what to do.
No, absolutely. And that is a very good foundation for the way I approach every conversation with kids is I don't want to come off as perfect, because then they really don't
Right.
give a shit what I have to say. They don't want to hear it, because they have this assumption if I come in with a suit and tie like I usually do most days and talk to them like the same caseworker, teacher, probation officer, whatever, they don't want to listen. They've heard it all before and they can tell you what you're going to say. But if I sit down with them and they start to tell me how I don't understand and all that, and I can say, actually, hold on, give me 5 minutes and I'm going to tell you exactly how much I do understand, not yours specifically, but I can get in the ballpark of how you're feeling right now. And then will you give me a chance to talk? And I'm telling you what, you guys, that credible messenger approach, if you establish yourself as knowing and identifying what they're feeling and what they've been through, if you can say that to any degree, I promise you, you put me in a room with 10 kids, I'm going to come out with solid rapport and relationships and open trust with all 10 of those kids. We see it time and time again. And I love it. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, bringing somebody out of isolation in their feelings and giving them confidence that actually there's a lot of people around you that understand where you're at, and they really, really want to help you support yourself, but they also need your support. Now we got community. You're not alone anymore.
Mhm.
Can
Yep.
can I give you an example? It's kinda related, kinda not. Um, one of my last duty stations before I retired, I got put in charge of a section that was labeled the trouble section. And I had a young lady that was 20 years old at the time. Unfortunately, she had been through a sexual assault. So now here comes another guy, in charge of this situation. And I just from feeling out the situation, I learned that she responded better to text messages, even though she's 5 feet from me.
Yep.
That's how she was more comfortable. And
Mm.
that's how I was able to get through to her. And so,
Meet her where she was.
yep. So she had the reputation of being kind of a poor performer. Um, Once I figured it out, I had to put my ego aside,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
realize, all right, yeah, I don't really like the text, but if this is going to work, it's going to work. And we ended up turning that shop around, and she's got promoted 3 times since that time. So it's
Doc,
just
That's
knowing
awesome.
people.
The proof is
Mhm.
there, man. The proof is there. I get kids calling me all the time, texting me, emailing me constantly years after we've, you know, stopped professionally working with each other. And it's the same thing every time. You didn't talk to me like everybody else. You took time to listen. It's just shifting. But you said it best, and that's the thing that I'm so passionate about. This is systemic change, a shift in paradigms in the systems, because we've been trying this for a long time, right? This punitive punishment, do as I say, and if not, we're going to lock you up. You're going to think about it, and then you're going to come out, and if you do it again, we're going to lock you back up. We've tried it. We've seen all the failures. We've got this new way that kids are really responding to, and I I pride myself in the amount of kids that call me for parenting advice now that they're parents themselves. Um, how do I fill out my W-2 or my W-4 for employment? Can you help me find a job? Can you help me find an apartment? I'm going through relationship troubles. I have questions about my sexuality. You name it. I trust you. We get it all the time. And those other people that I'm seeing on this chat, and a lot of the people that I work with, they're cut from the same cloth, and they operate in a way where kids want to be around them. They don't avoid them. They tell them the raw truth, even though sometimes they know it might get them in trouble, or it might be rough for us to hear. They trust us.
Kids want boundaries. They will tell you they don't, but they thrive with structure and they thrive with
Yeah.
healthy boundaries. And you're teaching them how to have those by
Yeah.
balancing that love with a little bit of honest truth. And what I
Sure.
love is you're creating a culture of authenticity and connection. So between students and the peer to peer, but also professional to peer as
Yeah.
mentors, where they see you and they respect you for the authority figure that you are, but they see you as somebody that they can open up to because you've
Yeah.
proven that in those little drips of your story.
Yeah.
So
We're not writing a cookie cutter plan for the kid after kid after
mhm,
kid. We're learning about, what do you need? What happened
right,
to you that we can
right.
address, and how do we make you whole? How do we do this for this kid? And that's where that aha moment for me became so apparent. And it did before in my career, in different pieces along the way, when we're prescribing the same number of counseling and parenting classes, and here you go, do that, and if you don't, I'm going to take your kids away or terminate your parental rights. So that's not good. What that might not be. Doc, you said it best. We got people who can't communicate face to face. It's no fault of their own. They have things going on where it's different. We have to meet them where they're at, and we have to
Mhm,
understand the why, so we can be their person, their rock, their foundation, right?
I think
absolutely.
as adults, we need to remember that although children are children, they're still people, and we need to treat them as
Yeah.
people.
There you
Um,
go.
they know,
And
and they'll.
yeah, they have so much to teach us. I think that's the thing is
Oh,
when we can tell kids that we want to hear your voice and we want to learn from you, they'll give it to you. But that helps them to feel valued. If you're in school and all the teachers ever do is give you a spiel on how to be a better human with all the social emotional learning concepts, but don't ask for your input and how to pull some of that gold out of them so we understand their world better.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I keep thinking listen hard and love hard because love is a verb and people think it's a feeling. Love is a verb. It's how you
Yeah.
um, it's truly how you connect with others and how you help people move forward and how you show it that you care instead of just saying it because those kids probably hear a lot of empty words but they see the action in your staff of love.
100%. I promised I'd get to this moment, and I have to vocalize
Yes,
this. I
please.
got to articulate the process, because for me, so all of that approach for me kind of developed over time, over several years. And I've had this idea in my heart and in my brain for the longest time to, start a movement. And thankfully, as a nation, we're actually becoming more informed on trauma and the effects that it has on your physical brain, your decision making, your impulsivity, all the things, your attention span, you name it. I could go on for days about that because I experience a lot of that. But one of the things, for me, um, I think it was important for me to understand how it felt on the other side. I knew I wanted to give people the freedom to be authentically them. And I knew I wanted to give people the freedom to not feel judged and to come out of hiding with their pain, so we can begin to understand and indemnify them and make them whole so they can have the life that they deserve. I didn't understand what that felt like, though, until I started in my current position and I started introducing myself to my new staff. And I'm this guy, first week I'm wearing a nice suit and trying to give off this good shiny impression, and they're feeling me out like, who is this dude, And um, one staff member in particular came in one day, and it was, I had 15-minute appointments scheduled with everybody in the building, and one of them in particular asked me about a picture that sat behind my desk. And because it's an oddly placed picture, I got all my beautiful family. I got, my obviously a ton of dog pictures. You got to have those, right? But one of them in particular is one I keep framed, and I keep it actually everywhere on my desktop, on my computer, on my phone screen. And it's a picture. I went back to my alleyway and I just took a picture, and it's here's where you come from, buddy. Like, don't forget it, man. You can't lose that. That's where you started. Here's where you are. So be proud of that first, but also don't lose those feelings of what it felt like to be in that position. Otherwise, you've lost that ability to connect on certain levels. He asked me about it, and I told him, and he went, okay. And he left, and he came back the next week, and he asked me a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And all of a sudden, we have two men who are, I was 39 at the time, so I won't say two men in their 40s. He was in his 40s. I was still in my 30s. But two men who are discovering for the first time in their life, holy cow, another human being has felt the same things that I do. And they have things that they deal with on a daily basis, as far as imposter syndrome and anxiety and depression and panic and paranoia. I had no clue. I thought I was the only man on planet Earth that felt those feelings.
I'm so glad you said that, because we say all the time on this show that you are not alone. You feel like you are, but you're
You'd feel
not.
like, yeah, that feeling, Doc, I can't even describe it. I don't know. I mean, other than my birth of my children, I honestly, the elation in my marriage, of course, but the elation that I felt, I'll use freedom, the freedom I felt.
Yes.
All of a sudden, this world opened up to me where I thought, oh my God, have I been missing this? Like, there are other people out there. And I knew it's the most ironic thing, because I've wanted to give that and worked a decade and a half at this point to give people that sense of freedom. But I had never experienced what it was like on my end. And when it happened, I became immensely proud of how far I've come, instantly connected to people when, they share their stories of overcoming their own situations. And I go, wow, this is amazing. Like, I didn't know. None of us have ever talked about this. I certainly haven't. I just kept it to myself to various degrees. I never really, I talk about certain events in my life to try to relate, but now I feel so free. My world's expanded immensely to the point where I just can't stop talking about it. And I want you, and you, all you kids and adults, I want you to have that freedom. You deserve it too,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to stop. That's like that's my fire right now. And I do that. That's for my staff too. Now, my role professionally is to really invest in my staff so they can invest in their kids, or our kids. And, I encourage them to whatever degree is professional and appropriate and doesn't put them in compromising situations, to use their stories. We all have one. We all have one. Doesn't have to be mine. Doesn't have to be yours.
I think a great word that would sum it all up is liberation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gives you immediate purpose for your pain when you can
100%.
relieve someone else by showing them they're not alone in that.
That's right.
And I experienced it myself too. So that's
Yeah.
what led me to
Liberation.
this path of work.
Liberation. That's beautiful.
Yep.
Breaking the cycle, man. I tell you what, you guys, if you really sit here and think about this, honestly, and I implore everybody to really sit and think, those of you that have been caught in these generational patterns, 5 minutes, huh, Doc? All right. If you have been a person who has just stopped or worked really hard at reversing or completely stopping trends that preceded you for years, and you were on a certain trajectory because of that, and really resigned to the fact that I guess that's going to be my life, stop and think for a second how powerful this is. For you to have said no more, it stops with me. You changed a life, your life, from a trajectory that was going this way to this way. If you have kids, if you work with kids, if you have people you're mentoring, you change their lives. You affected and impacted generations to come. Is that not the most powerful concept that you can imagine? I think about that constantly. And some people are, really nonchalant about their stories or the fact that they came out of certain situations. And I go, no. Think for a second what you did. You
You get
changed.
to be one.
You changed history. Like this could have been history books, the same cycle. You broke it. Now you're making a different one. You rewrote it for bunches of people, and it's beautiful. Beautiful. I love it.
You mentioned you have kids. If you don't, I have 2 that I'll give you. Free to a good home.
Oh, some days I'll even trade. Yeah, maybe it's even trade, depending on.
I hear you. Yes. Well, I
got a
do want to mention.
I'll throw in a golden retriever.
Oh, I'm not trading my dog.
Yeah.
I'd take Marley. Oh man, Monarch Marley.
A lot of people. Oh, yeah.
Is amazing. She's the therapy dog at the Monarch Academy. But I did want to mention too, just up in the upper corner of your screen, you'll see a QR code. Doc graciously volunteers his time every Tuesday, every Wednesday here on the Convene podcast, and just appreciates any small donation of a few dollars thrown his way to help just cover overhead charges. But we just greatly appreciate the opportunity to bring stories like Ryan's on. And Ryan, you've just touched a lot of people with your story tonight, and just your approach. You're taking we talk about like these trauma-informed approaches, right, with youth, where yes, what happened to you, but you're taking a resiliency approach with your kids, and you're resiliency informed, where how can we move forward?
Yeah.
How can we reframe our thoughts? How can we turn what happened to us into something that can be useful? Instead of the worst thing ever, it can turn into something useful when it becomes someone else's guidebook.
Yep.
So
you're not destined to be. You're not destined to be a part of that cycle. You can take it. Right. You can flip it. Purpose that pain, change lives, and break the cycle. That's what it's all about.
In the special forces community, we have a saying. Most people like to say, "Hey, good luck." We say, "Make your own luck."
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, beautiful. Beautiful.
Hey,
if anyone, I was just going to say too, if anyone wants to see a few of Ryan's videos, I think they're pretty awesome. Is it okay if I share?
You can definitely share. I just a disclaimer for the audience. It's just, I don't script them. It's just me. I decide.
They are gold. They are gold. It's Cycle Breaker Ryan on YouTube. Just check out how he speaks to those kids, and he'll teach you some stuff along the way too. But we've got about it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we leave the show, when we close the show out, don't go anywhere. Stick around.
I'll stick around. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate this. I appreciate you giving platform to new ideas and new approaches, because man, this is, and I, for folks that know me or folks that have heard of me, they know I'm on fire for this. And so when I get the opportunity to share this passion, and Kate, you've been along for a lot of that ride so far. Thank you for bearing with me.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I just believe that's how it was supposed to happen.
Yeah,
I think those connections are made when there's lives that can be changed, and we thank our friend for bringing us together too.
Absolutely, Doc. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Great show. Stick around, like I said. And for the rest of you guys, we will see you hopefully tomorrow. And if not, we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.